Hello and welcome. I'm Simon from Studio Plus 3, which is an architecture studio based here in Sydney. And I'm also a member of the EmAGN committee, which is the Emerging Architects and Graduates Network, supported by the Australian Institute of Architects. EmAGN is a group that exists to connect, support and advocate for emerging architects and graduates around Australia. Now, COVID-19 is obviously having a big impact on architectural studios at the moment, and creating a lot of uncertainty and questions for recent graduates and employees. To help give some information around this, I'm joined today by Fiona Martin. Fiona is a practice management consultant who has worked in HR and management for architectural studios for over 20 years, working with a number of large practices around Sydney. She's also the chair of the Institute's Large Practice HR Committee, which includes around 25 large architecture studios. Her clients are the ones making some tough decisions at the moment around business continuity, so her time is very much appreciated. Thanks, Fiona, for joining me today.
Thanks, Simon. This is a great group, the EmAGN group. It's the next generation of architects, so to have a representative body such as yourselves is really useful, I think, in these times too. So hope I can give some advice today around some of your questions.
Great, thanks. So the first question is around employees' rights. Many people at the moment are being asked to reduce hours, sign new agreements, or even facing redundancies. So what are employees' rights when being asked to make some of these changes?
Firstly, there is a duty to consult. So under the Architects Award, there is a duty for employers to consult with employees on any major workplace change. And that would fall under salary changes, and working arrangements would fall under a major change. So there cannot be an overnight wholesale change to working arrangements without this true consultation. So what does true consultation look like? Well, it doesn't mean sending out an email to everybody that this is going to happen next week. It's about meeting with employees or meeting as a group or individually. Now with remote working, that would mean video or telephone, etc. So the consultation is an opportunity for information to be given to employees about potential changes that are coming up. But it's also a two-way street. So it's an opportunity for employees to put forth their own points of view around what the changes that have just been advised are. And it also gives the employers an opportunity to hear that a different point of view that they may not have thought of before making these changes. So it's a really valuable exercise, because you can't just change someone's working pay. That would be a breach of your employment agreements. And it's unlikely that an employee will agree to a reduction in the absence of a legitimate reason, but they may be more willing to accept a reduction if they know that their job's on the line, and it might mean saving other people's jobs, and it might mean the longevity of the practice. It's really important to understand that having got to this stage to make salary reductions, an employer will have gone through a whole process, hopefully, of working out what other cost-saving measures might be before reducing salaries. It's a serious process to go through, and hopefully that all of that's happened before then. And to remember that working 5 days but being paid for 4 is a pay cut, and working 4 days and being paid for 4 days is change working arrangements. So there's no actual pay cut. You're just being paid pro rata for the time that you're working. So we do have to understand too that employees aren't doing this to take money from you and put it in their pocket. It's an unprecedented situation that we're in right now. So I think that needs to be considered. We're all going to have to take a hit somewhere, and we're in this together. So it may just be considering working under those arrangements for a short period of time. So there's a number of scenarios that might look like.
And is that considered a renegotiation of the contract?
Essentially, no. Your employer will likely ask you to sign a letter of reduction of pay, and that letter should include the reduction amount and the period of the term that would be for, and you'd hope it's not for very long. But all the terms and conditions should remain the same as your contract. That shouldn't change. If you're asked to sign a new agreement, I would read it very carefully, just so that you know what you're signing, obviously. But if you're asked to sign a casual contract, you need to be aware that those conditions and entitlements under a casual contract are very different to a contract if you're a permanent full-time. So you need to be aware that the notice period or payment in lieu of notice is different. You don't accrue entitlements, etc. So just be aware of what the contract type that you might be asked to re-sign, but generally it should just be a letter explaining the difference of pay for a period of time, and that's a variation to your contract essentially. So just read anything carefully that you've been given to sign.
Are employees allowed to reduce the pay to below the minimum award wage, even if it's just a temporary measure?
The answer to that is categorically no. So award covered employees cannot be paid less than what the minimum wage is in their award. So if your practice is introducing pay reductions, you need to make sure that anybody on the award is not reduced below that award. You may be asked to work less days. That would satisfy that. You'd be just working less days at the same rate. But no, you can't take an across-the-board cut if you're on an award wage.
And where can employees go for advice around contracts and entitlements?
Well, the first protocol would be to look at your own agreement and go through that. And if you had any questions, you could direct them to your employer. The entitlements around your employment conditions are enshrined in the Fair Work Act, the National Employment Standards, and the Architects Award. So we have two major instruments at play here, which is the award and the NES, the National Employment Standards. So often industries will negotiate different conditions in an award than the Fair Work Act, and that's because they're usually more favourable and specific to that industry. And so where it is more favourable, where a clause in the award is more favourable, it overrides the NES. And an example of that is the notice period for terminations and redundancies, or any resignation generally. So the NES, under the NES, that's a sliding scale, depends on your tenure. So if you've been there under 12 months, there's 1 week's notice. If you've been there between 1 and 2 years, there's 2 weeks' notice, etc. But the Architects Award is more generous in that. It's 1 month. So it works both ways. If you're terminated by your employer, they must give you 1 month's notice or payment in lieu of notice. But it is important to note that even in probation, your contracts might say 1 week. It is actually 1 month. So you cannot contract out of the conditions of the Architects Award. So whatever's in that award prevails. So my advice would be to read the Architects Award. I'd tell everybody to read it. It really does govern the working relationship. So that's important to understand what that is right now in these times. When you started with your employment agreement, you should have been issued the Fair Work Information Statement, which comes from the Fair Work Commission. That sets out the National Employment Standards, if you're not aware what they are. And I think, Simon, you'll be issuing a number of links and any documents I referred to as attachments or links to those documents. Another one is the ACA and the AIA. Right now, the ACA, the Association of Consulting Architects, they have all their COVID stuff free at the moment. So they're doing a lot of, they've got some lawyers that are interpreting the packages and the aid that is coming through right now. They also have some stuff on there about working conditions. So that's a great site to go to, and the Institute are putting out a site as well. And the award will always override what's in the agreement, despite whether you've signed it or not. So just check that.
How could the recently announced wage subsidy affect recent graduates?
Yeah, it's obviously good. It's obviously good for the junior levels because the pay is more aligned to that amount of subsidy. So I think, yeah, if it means keeping jobs, I can see that it will keep jobs. If employees have lost their job, there is potential that they can be brought back on this subsidy, and that's a good thing as well. So let's see how it plays out. But definitely I would be doing my research myself as a graduate to find out how I can benefit from that personally.
It's obviously difficult times all around at the moment, but what things can younger employees do to help from their side?
Look, I think the best thing is to be visible. I think being apart from your team and apart from the leaders of the business, you don't want to slip into obscurity. And I think being visible means communicating and being part of those team meetings, the video online, but also to seek out where people might need help, being a team player and actually helping others. Grads are tech savvy, they're nimble. You can jump across projects, you're willing to learn, you're eager, and I think that's really important. And I think you guys have spent 5 years studying. You know what it's like to study in isolation and be remote, and I think it's drawing upon that focus that you had when you were had your deadlines for your studio and your projects, to really apply that to working from home. I think always ask questions. This is where you're learning, and the people above you should be taking on a coaching role, and this is more difficult when it's remote, but that's what I'm saying, stay visible. I think the other most important thing is to check your work. If you're not checking your work, then you're relying on something to be caught upstream. And I think it's really important that you take that responsibility and you do it to the best of your ability and you make time to do that. The other thing is to work out what's stopping you getting the work done, or what are your distractions. I mean, this is the biggest thing in working from home, is the distractions. And everybody else at home will be distracted as well. So maybe get together and say, this is how I dealt with my distraction. So I think it's really meeting head on what your distractions are, because that's the main thing that's going to pull out the productivity side of things. So, yeah.
And what things can employers do at the moment, perhaps around access to resources or training?
Well, employers are under a lot of stress at the moment, and they've got a lot going on, not just running this project that you're working on. There's a lot going on in the background. But I think, yes, there is time that they can give you. And I think that's the most important thing, is it's a simple thing, which is time. Time needs to be given around briefing you properly, and also reminding them that they need to really communicate to the power of two. I think communicate. So that can't be stressed enough. It's really about giving, in this unprecedented time, giving you time, and time is precious. But by the same token, this is time for grads to shine. I mean, it's time that you can give as well. It's showing your enthusiasm. If you've got a problem, come with a solution. So that's always a great old saying, but it's true. And work out how to problem solve something before you do escalate it to that question. Really give it time and come at it from that point of view, that don't just rely on up the chain. And I think this is an opportunity for you to really make that impact and have that visibility and show that problem solving process. It's hard, but everybody's doing it. So it's not like it's unique to your practice or yourselves. I think we do have to remember there is the other side to this, and being recovery ready. So yeah, we will get through this. And to maintain a certain amount of positivity, just stay in contact with everybody and keep those communication lines open. That's all I can suggest right now.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much to Fiona Martin, fionamartinconsulting.com.au. Thanks very much for your time and advice today, and I'm sure that's going to prove very helpful and useful to a lot of the architecture graduates and employees around architecture at the moment. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thanks, Simon.